Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and welcome to a reading vlog that I'm excited to get started with. This is kind of impromptu. I wasn't planning on starting this reading vlog today, but earlier today I actually filmed a video for my Patreon where I planned out all of the content that I want to make through the rest of the year. If you're not part of my Patreon or you're more of a casual viewer, you might not know what's been going on in my life lately. Long story short, this spring and summer I got pregnant and got a new job, which has made my life a little bit extra chaotic and kind of derailed my reading and content life. The exciting news is that I will be going out on maternity leave soon, which means I won't be working for a few weeks before the baby comes. And then of course, after the baby comes, I will be spending lots of time with that baby, but also hopefully lots of time reading and filming reading vlogs, catching up on content and things that I've been meaning to make. And anyway, when I was filming that behind the scenes content planning vlog for Patreon, I laid out a whole bunch of reading vlogs that I have planned for the next 3-ish months, which I'm really excited about. And then I also mentioned kind of offhandedly that I only have about 25 books on my physical TBR right now. And it actually feels really achievable to make it a goal to read all of those books before the end of the year. Many of them I already have kind of bookmarked for future reading vlogs. Some of them I don't have any specific vlogs in mind, so I may just have to mood read them or get creative with some reading vlogs. And then there are some books that do fall into a category or a grouping or something that would make for a fun reading vlog that I don't specifically have planned for any future time. And after finishing that, I was like, why not start today with one of those reading vlog concepts? Let's get a couple of books knocked off my physical TBR and I guess get ahead of my October, November, and December reading and content plans. So I think I'm going to attack 2 books for this reading vlog, and they are both books in series. I'm not a big series reader, to be honest. It's partly because of the genres I read are usually mystery thrillers and or contemporary romance. And while sometimes there are series published within those genres, it's definitely not the norm like I would say it seems to be for fantasy as a genre. But I have found myself in the middle of 2 book series that I've got the final books on my shelves to just read, then I can knock them off my physical TBR, I can knock the series off my eventual TBR, and we will be good to go. So the first one I have here is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This is the 3rd and final book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which is a young adult mystery thriller series. The first book follows a high school student named Pip, who as part of her senior year capstone project decides to investigate this murder case in her hometown. I did enjoy that first book. I think I gave it 4 stars. The second book felt a little bit more forced to me. The mystery that Pip ends up solving, I didn't really understand why she was so invested in it or why we as readers were supposed to be invested in it. So I think that second book was more of a 2 or 3 star, but I do have the 3rd and final book here. I know nothing about what the plot of the book is or the mystery or anything. Hopefully I enjoy it more so as much as I enjoyed the first book in the series, but either way it will be satisfying to get this 3rd book read. And then the other series that I will be finishing is Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the 2nd book after Divine Rivals, which was a super popular booktube book. I think there are only 2 books in this series, so I think by reading this one I will be completing it, so that will feel good. The first book in this series was I would consider it a historical fiction romance with a little bit of fantasy in it because it does discuss a war between gods. The fantasy pieces were definitely my least favorite, so we'll see how much the 2nd book focuses on that element. I have kind of a feeling it will focus more on the fantasy, but the historical fiction and the romance parts of it I did really enjoy. I think I gave that first book also 4 stars, so I'm interested to see how I enjoy this follow-up, because as much as I saw in terms of buzz about that first book, I don't remember seeing very much about this 2nd book. And I'm not sure if that's just kind of my lack of engagement in the book community lately, or if people were generally disappointed by this 2nd book. I really don't know, but regardless, I am going to give it a try. And that is going to be this video. It's going to be kind of a quick hitter with only 2 books. books. I'm not sure how much I will talk about regarding these 2 books because they are final books in a series. I obviously don't want to spoil them for anyone else who still has to continue on in these series, but I will give enough of a review so that anybody who either has been interested in these series or read earlier books in the series and is wondering if they should continue on, I will give that recommendation. I currently am kidless. Actually, my 2 other children are currently having a sleepover with my in-laws, and my husband is playing in a softball tournament today, and I'm not sure how long that's going to go. So I've got a lot of just alone time, quality reading time ahead of me, which I'm very excited about. I'll probably catch up on some housework while also taking it easy on my 33-week pregnant body, probably go pick up some dinner, and I'll be back once I have an initial update on one of these books and can tell you some of my early thoughts. Okay, my friends, I have a reading update because I've started As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. I'm actually about halfway through the book. It's reading really quickly, and I'm so happy to say that I am very pleasantly surprised about not only this book, but also my experience reading this book. And I say that because on one hand, yes, I'm kind of coming off of a lull from the second book in this series where I didn't love the second book so much. And so it didn't leave me with super high expectations for this third book. But also I'm kind of in a lull in my reading life where I just have not really been enjoying a lot of what I'm reading. And while I don't expect this to be like an all-time favorite book or even a favorite book of the year or anything, I'm giving it a lot of credit because it's really impressing me. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really feeling like it's way stronger than the second book in this series. And honestly, I think I'm enjoying it more than even the first book in this series. And I'm gonna have to talk about it obviously in a way that doesn't go too in depth about the plot of this book. All I will say about it is that Pip is solving yet another mystery, but interestingly, this mystery is kind of like a culmination of the first 2 books and characters that were involved in the stories of those first 2 books. And it's not just creating like an arbitrary new third mystery that we have no reason to care about. It's really using some of the groundwork that's already been laid to create a mystery that we can't help but care about because we have come to know and have read about these characters for now 3 books worth. I also think what I enjoy about this book is that Pip is directly in the center of this current mystery. The stakes are actually really high for her, which feels more interesting for me to read about as a reader rather than just a podcast host, you know, putting herself into the center of some true crime situation for her podcast and for a story. Like, this situation kind of has come to her, and that feels natural. It feels high stakes, like I said, and I feel invested in it. So I enjoy all of that. I also will say that this book so far, again, I'm only halfway, so who knows what it will do for the second half, but it doesn't seem to be focusing as much on like the multimedia elements or the creative ways of solving the mystery, which again, maybe that comes in the second half when she is actually solving things. But that's something, and even the podcast element itself is something that I've never personally super closely connected to or really loved. It comes off as, I don't know, sometimes a little bit gimmicky. Like, I like creative ways of solving mysteries and telling stories, but I don't need just technology and multimedia elements to be shoved in a book just for that to be kind of the hook of the book. I'm not sure if that makes sense. And I guess I could see that being something that other people, when they read this book, could miss if that's something you really loved, especially in, I think the first book maybe did that the most, utilizing like social media posts and things to solve the mystery. So I don't know, I say that as a personal preference thing that I am really enjoying and appreciating about this book, that fair warning could not be everybody's favorite. If you agree with me on that point, then I definitely think it's worth, at least at this point that I'm at, reading this book and getting into this third mystery, because I'm liking it, like I said, I think the best out of the whole series. So I really hope that that continues and I continue loving it. I am flying through it. I've been alternating between reading it physically and then also listening to the audiobook when I have time. So I think I'm going to be able to fly through this in the next day or so. So I'll be back once I've finished it to give you final thoughts and hopefully continue this good luck streak, not only with this book, but the next book as well. We will see. Okay, my friends, back with an update. I thought this was gonna be a nice quick 2 or 3 day video, but of course plans change, life happens. One of my kids ended up getting sick at daycare this week, so then both siblings had to stay home for a couple of days, so that disrupted things. But we are back on track. They are back at daycare now. It's a Friday. I'm ready to finish off these books and get this, what was supposed to be a quick hitter video, done with. So first update is that I finished As Good as Dead, and I really enjoyed this all the way through. After I finished it, I went on Goodreads to put in my rating and everything, and I saw that there are some people that did not enjoy the direction that this book went, and that's fine. Obviously everyone can have their own opinion, but I really did like it, and so I actively disagree with some of the people's negative ratings. There's some critique on whether Pip stays to her true character within this book, or if she does something that's sort of out of character. I don't care. I enjoyed what she did. I enjoyed reading the story. I don't think it's totally out of character. I really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna give it 4 stars, and I'm actually gonna say this is my favorite out of the series, which, how rare is that? At least for me, in the few series that I've read, the last book is almost never my favorite. The first book definitely usually is, but I was just really invested in this one. I loved the story and I liked the conclusion. And now with this book, I believe I have read every book that Holly Jackson has written. She's got this series of 3 books, of course, and then she also has 5 Survive, which, unpopular opinion, I also really liked. That is a fun young adult road trip thriller. about a group of friends that is going on a road trip in an RV. I thought it was really fun, pretty different from this book, but I enjoyed it. I gave that one 4 stars. And then I also really enjoyed her latest book, which was The Reappearance of Rachel Price, another young adult mystery thriller about a woman or a girl who, when she was a baby, her mom disappeared. Now, something like 20 years later, there's a documentary being produced about her missing mom, and then her mom comes back into the picture. Really liked that one as well, gave it 4 stars. So I'm landing at 4 stars for this one. So I haven't had any 5-star books from Holly Jackson, but she is very solidly a 4-star author for me, which to me puts it in like auto buy, auto read territory. I will definitely continue to pick up pretty much everything she puts out. And I just highly, highly recommend her as a young adult thriller author. So my current update is that I am about halfway through Ruthless Vows. I've been alternating reading this one physically as well as with the audio. Works really well with my life right now. And this, as I've said, is the second and I think final book after Divine Rivals in the same series. It's a pure continuation of that first story, which is kind of a historical fiction book with a little bit of a fantasy element as well as a somewhat prominent romance element. That first book, to give the synopsis, is about these 2 characters named Roman and something, Iris, who are both journalists. They work for the same like newspaper in the first book, and they're kind of rivals. They're going for the same promotion, and then they find out relatively early on in the first book that they have these magical typewriters at their houses that can send letters to each other like through a wardrobe. So that's part of the magical elements of the book, but more importantly, that kind of drives the romance because they have kind of a pen pal relationship where they eventually figure out who each other is and that they don't hate each other. And then things happen later in that book related to a war that's happening between 2 gods. That's the part of the book that really kind of loses me. It feels very fantasy heavy. I don't know, understand the lore of gods. It means almost nothing to me. In that first book, I think there were excerpts of the story between the 2 gods who are feuding, who also are like scorned lovers. I think they were in love with each other and then they had some fight and now they are in a war against each other. And so yeah, in that first book, the 2 main characters end up going to the front lines. It feels very historical fiction because it is pretty war-based at that point. But again, there's that underlying magical god situation. This second book takes place after the events of the first book, and so I won't spoil where that first book ends up, but I don't think it's a spoiler to say that we're continuing reading about the relationship between Iris and Roman, which all I'll say is that they start separated in this book again. So we again get a little bit of that typewriter situation. There's a little bit of a fun twist on it in this book that I liked as kind of a callback to the first book, but a little bit different. And then also the typewriter thing is used to actually propel some of the plot forward, not just their romance, but like actually what's happening around them. And I liked that too. Hard to talk about a lot of this without, you know, spoiling the book, but I am only halfway through, so not sure where it's gonna go from here, but I'm interested. I wouldn't say I'm like pleasantly surprised and loving it more than I expected to, but I am enjoying it well enough. I do want to see where the story goes and how their story concludes. So I'm hopefully gonna get through the rest of this relatively quickly, and we'll come back with my final thoughts and wrap up this video. Okay, my friends, time for a final update. No makeup today. It's a Sunday. This is mom life. I am just here to, as quickly as possible, wrap up my final thoughts on Ruthless Vows and conclude this video as a whole. So let's talk about it. I did finish Ruthless Vows. I did enjoy it. I think for me, it's a solid 3 stars, which for me is not a bad rating. 3 stars is like, I enjoyed it and I would recommend it to a certain group of people who are looking for something, you know, specific in their reading. I don't think it's a must read for everybody. For me, it didn't change my life or become a favorite, but it's pretty solid, and that's what this is. I am glad I read it to continue on the story. I do think there were certain elements of this book that were pleasant surprises to me that I came to enjoy more than I thought I would. Actually, I'd say the fantasy elements but also kind of the lack of fantasy elements. I'm interested to dive into other people's reviews, especially high fantasy lovers, to see how they enjoyed this series. I thought I saw that a lot of fantasy readers really loved the first book. And like I said, I never really saw a lot of reviews for the second book, but I figured because it was kind of mainly a fantasy book and series that this second book would focus more on those fantasy elements. I would say it did carry on the few elements that it had, so the magical typewriters and the war between gods. But beyond that, there's not a lot. There's not like magic used in the everyday by these characters. There's not even that much magic used by the gods themselves. Like there's a little bit, but definitely not overwhelming. And it didn't turn me off as a non-fantasy reader, but I wonder if that's something that fantasy readers would have wanted more of. I definitely think that is possible. I don't think I loved the romance as much in this second book because it wasn't as present as in the first book. And also maintaining a romance is always a little bit less swoon worthy than like the development and building of an initial romance. So there is that. And yeah, I don't really think I have anything else super specific to say about it. I'll just say I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I finished off this series, and I'm very glad to have 2 more books knocked off of my physical TBR, especially because they were both conclusions to series, and ultimately I would recommend both of them. So let me know if you have read either of these books that I talked about or any of the books in either of these series. And if you have, let me know if your thoughts are similar to mine or if you disagree. If you haven't read them, let me know if I convinced you to pick either of them up. They are pretty different in genre, so if you haven't read either of these series, hopefully one of them kind of calls to your interests. And otherwise, let me know if you're interested in seeing more kind of mini vlogs like this as I continue chipping away at the rest of my books on my physical TBR before the end of the year. I know that's not a unique concept. It's something that a lot of people are working on kind of all the time, but especially getting towards the end of the year. But I would definitely be down for doing more videos kind of like this, a little bit shorter form, a little bit looser themed. Or let me know if you prefer more of the larger scale, you know, 4 or 5 books on a TBR, really strong theme tying them together, more like 40-minute to hour-long reading vlogs. Let me know if that's more your thing. Whatever you think, just let me know because I'm curious to hear. All right, other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.